So the executives out there, it's picture investing in HR, if done correctly, is one of the biggest ROIs you can have. One of the ways to stabilize a lot and accelerate your growth. But you got to make sure you invest in your HR team in the right places.
This is Lead with Culture. I am Kate Volman, and on this episode, we talk all things HR. I was joined by Doug Murphy, who has run several small businesses over the last 15 years, was trained by the largest human resources and compliance company in the United States, and is now the director for PuzzleHR. There was simply not enough time to go over everything that we could have gone over in this episode with Doug because he has so much experience in HR and working with small businesses. But we did dig into, of course, leadership and culture. And we also talked about the onboarding process and the importance of the onboarding process in order to really attract and retain great talent. So we got into a lot of really great topics when it comes to HR and how to build out your HR team so that you are continuously developing your people and helping them grow so that your organization grows. There was a lot going on. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Doug, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited about our conversation.
Okay, I am so grateful to be here. So I'm excited. Let's get into it.
Yeah, we're going to have a good time talking about all things HR and culture and attracting and retaining talent, all the things that business leaders are thinking about today. So let's start with your world is HR. So what are some of the biggest challenges that leaders are facing with HR today?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of them. HR, as we know, evolves daily. And there's a lot of the typical HR pitfalls out there and issues that they're struggling with, whether it's culture things, it's productivity, it's generational gaps, right? There's a lot. But what a lot of people don't realize is probably one of the biggest challenges in HR now is with HR evolving. HR in today's world is probably 9 or 10 different jobs. And a lot of times when I'm meeting with the executive team and a CHRO is not sitting at the table, they may not quite realize that they might be thinking of HR from a few years ago or 5 years ago, where HR was 2 or 3 or 4 jobs. So now when you sit there and expect an HR team of 2 or 3 people to handle 10 people's jobs, it's very difficult. There's not enough time, there's not enough expertise to say, oh, you 1 or 2 people, you should be good at payroll and benefits and leadership training and compliance and safety and legal and culture and onboarding and sticky situations. And there's just so much to it that a lot of times a team just can't have enough hours in the day or have enough knowledge to be able to handle all the different roles of HR.
So when people are building out their teams, obviously people that are listening, different size organizations, different types of companies, when they're building it out, what do you define as HR and what should fall under that role versus some of these other departments that people are creating, especially those that are creating more under company culture and development, and that's kind of separate from HR. So what does that look like for you as far as HR and what it all encompasses?
Yes, a lot of businesses obviously won't have the headcount or the budget to be able to have the luxury of redundancies everywhere. So they really need to be strategic with how they develop their HR team. And with that, we need to make sure that we're not hiring just 3 great HR people. Because if you hire 3 people, but they all have the same skill sets and expertises, you're missing a big piece of the puzzle. So what really we need to think about when we're building out an HR team is how does that team, with the budget and man hours they have, how do they best cover the whole list of tasks that HR has? So we may have somebody that really is an expert in culture. So they're going to be working on things with performance, with culture, with hiring, with onboarding, with what does the first 30, 60 days look like? Then we may need somebody on more of the admin tactical side. With HR, as we know, there is fires and 911s and things that need to be done every day with urgency. And that job typically doesn't slow down. So whether it is things of processing payroll, making benefit changes, it is employees getting sick, calling in, not going to be there. It is a sticky situation between a leader and an employee. So really we first need to look at the organization as a whole. And then we need to say, what is our investment into HR? And we got to be really, really tactical with who we piece this team together. The biggest pitfall I see is we have a team of 3 HR people that are complementing each other's skills to create that puzzle. One of them may leave, and they put a job post up there and just say, looking for a great HR manager. They bring them into the fold, and now they can't do quite as good of a job as the person that was an expert in that field. And then all of a sudden we have people that are butting heads on the internal team, and that fractures out to everybody.
This is something that you also work with companies on, which is that creating a really detailed role description and scorecard for not only the people on your team, but especially the HR people. And when you're starting to build out any department, to make sure that everybody does have whatever their specialty is, so that you're able to accommodate whatever needs the organization has at that time. And so what does that look like as far as, do you see that a lot of companies really lack very clear role description scorecards, and that's a challenge when it comes to hiring?
They do. They lack that. And a lot of times it does come from senior leadership. A lot of times is they don't quite realize every role that makes up HR now. And a lot of times I'll meet with a business, I'll meet with the HR manager, and we're going through their role of what they're really doing. Then we'll look at what were they expected to do when they hire. And they're not even close to being aligned, because they have learned and adapted to what they need to do to get the job done. And they may be working 50, 60-hour weeks. They're working overtime. They're doing everything they can to handle all of these roles. And then when I meet with the executive team, a lot of times they're, I'm not quite sure everything she's doing. There's a disconnect in some organizations between senior leadership and HR, where in today's world, the most effective organizations, typically HR now has a seat at the table. So we have a director of HR, a CHRO sitting at the table. They're in there making decisions, giving the data points. They're talking about the largest line item in a budget, typically is humans. People forget what HR really means, right? Our human resources. And when you look at that line item of employees, their salaries, their benefits, everything, taxes, workers' compensation, everything adds up to typically the largest line item. And a lot of times an organization isn't monitoring that line item as well as they should. So they're cutting costs, they're cutting headcount, they're cutting products, they're making changes, but sometimes they're not looking where they should. And that's when a strong HR person can come in, and they might be doing that due diligence on the background, whether we're getting surveys from a culture perspective. Why are people leaving? Where is our turnover? Is it in one organization? Is it just one leader that really is causing a lot of turnover, which is trickling down to a lot of now recruiting, a lot of time wasted, a lot of training? So if we can obviously work on culture, work on retention, work on getting the right people in right in the beginning, that could be one of the biggest ROIs a company can have. So that is where we need a strong HR present in the boardroom. And that way, when they're working together, we sometimes can make a company much more profitable.
Talking about people, obviously, that's the most important thing, right? Getting the right people on the team is one of the biggest roles of leadership, and getting those right people to be able to fulfill the mission of the organization. So, well, you've run businesses. Now you do this. HR is your world, Doug. So I'm curious what you've seen over the past 10, 15 years with businesses, and the challenge of attracting great talent, retaining great talent, and what that looks like, and what you've seen leaders, how proactive they are about getting that top talent into their organizations.
Yeah, a lot of times there's a lot of disconnect again between sometimes senior leadership and HR. And when they work together, that's when this works out the best. So some of the stuff I've seen over the years is they tend to, and this is a generic statement, but a lot of organizations hire too quickly, they fire too slowly, they don't want the cost and time and effort. So what they end up doing is they may hang on to someone who's not the right fit for way too long. So they're wasting thousands of dollars on an employee, and that has a ripple effect. So a lot of people don't realize that that one employee who has the same job title, the same compensation as somebody else who might be a future manager of the company, who's the hardest working person there, what happens is that poor employee does not bring themselves up. Your future rock star ends up bringing themselves down a few pegs. And what they do is they get this remorse, right? They're sitting there going, wait a minute, Joe's late every single day. He's on his phone every day. He's sleeping on the job. He's on Facebook. He's not paying attention. And he's still getting paid. He's still getting the same recognition as me. So a lot of times there's a huge ripple effect to keeping that poor talent. So one thing that continues on the HR ripple effect is that poor talent may not even realize that they are the poor talent. So this all comes back to leadership development. And again, a lot of times we'll talk to an owner or a CEO and say, who's doing your leadership development training? And they go, oh, my HR manager. I asked the HR manager how the leadership development training's going. And they go, I've never even taken leadership development. And they want me to give it, right? So a lot of times we need to obviously step in. And that's the nice thing in today's world with the amount of incredible businesses out there. You can outsource, co-source, partner with a lot of companies to fill the voids that you have internal, because you're never going to be able to afford every single type of HR skill set that you need. So you bring in a leadership development trainer, right? You bring people in to help with this. And when we're doing this and we realize, okay, here's the poor employee, let's have not only structure and policies and job descriptions and expectations clearly laid out, but how do we then have that crucial conversation from a manager to employee that they're not hitting the mark? How do we do it in a way where they don't storm out and bring down the culture? But how do they say, I want to get better. Help me get better. Because if we can help that one employee get better, it reduces the turnover. It reduces hiring costs and training. That employee raises up a little, which stops dragging other employees down. And we have that whole ripple effect occur. So a lot of things come down to policy, structure, a lot of fundamentals of HR, and then obviously having the right people with the right skill sets, which a lot of times does require education and training. So sometimes we got to work at that level, and then we can work ourselves up, and that can allow us to make better hiring decisions overall.
What you're talking about is coaching, right? It's giving people that skill set to not only lead a team or not to manage a team, but to become a coach, to be a coaching leader. I remember I worked for this company years ago, and it was a big company, and the HR had a process, and it was, you take this training. And it was so interesting because as a lifelong learner, I loved the trainings, but also they felt very, here's a training that we were taught and we are delivering it to you, instead of, hey, this is the kind of leadership training that we need in order to take the business where we want it to go. And I think that's really such a distinction. Whereas some people, of course, you can go take a course and then teach it to someone else, but is it the training that your people need? And is it what is really going to help them grow so that you can help your people grow so that your organization grows?
Yeah.
You have, again, a background in business and have run businesses and work with so many companies now. And you talk to so many organizations. Where do you suggest people start? Because I know some people might be listening saying, Doug, this is all well and good. I would love to be able to hire all these people to do all of these things. That is just not the case. So where do you start? Like, how can someone kind of assess their HR team department? Or maybe it's just one person, really assess and figure out, hey, what should I start with in order to really grow and build?
Yeah, and build is a key word there, because we really need to look in the mirror. And a lot of businesses I speak with, when we first start our conversation, they want all of the strategic, fun, big initiatives, but they're not ready for it.
What are the big fun initiatives? What are those?
So let's say when we're meeting with them and they're going, I'd like to develop career pathing. I would like to put some recognition programs in place and culture programs in place. They're going through things like a leadership development training. We're ready to do that. And I go, okay, well, let's look at your leaders and who they report to. Where's your org chart? They go, I don't have an org chart. So a lot of times we're a company putting the cart before the horse, right? So at our organization, obviously we meet with and we consult fractional HR for a lot of clients because we can fill the gaps that they don't have internally. So I get a really unique perspective. And when I'm meeting with a lot of clients, we say we need to build the foundation and then work our way up. So we need to look at even just the most basic HR document on earth, an employee handbook. A lot of people say, yeah, we have some handbook we put together, my payroll company gave me, it's sitting on a shelf. I'm like, forget the book. Policies are a huge, huge driving force behind the culture of this company. How lax are they? How strict are they? What are we allowing employees to do? Where are we giving managers the strength to discipline an employee when they are not following through with policy? So for instance, if it's a loosey-goosey culture and one employee is late every single day and they don't have a policy on that, that manager is not going to be able to discipline them. But if you now have a policy in place that's clearly stated, now that manager can hold a different conversation. And they can say, look, they can make the book the bad guy, right? We have a policy in place that says this. Hey, you're one of my best guys. I got to give you a warning if you're late again. Don't make me give you a warning. Just be on time. It's a whole different dialogue when you have structure to lean on. So a lot of times a company, we look at the foundational, not the fun stuff, but we need to get policies. We need to get structure. We need to talk through performance management. No, we're not going to do performance reviews every 60 days. No one on earth will do that and keep up with it. So what is a good cadence that will work for your company? So we really do need to look at the skill set of the HR department. And that's the first thing we do a lot of times is when we're meeting with a leader, a CEO of an organization, they say, well, let's have the conversation with your HR manager as well. Again, they need a seat at the table. So when we talk through with them and we realize that their skill sets and knowledge are this fraction of HR, well, let's supplement them with the rest of this so we can make an HR team. Because some people are great at maybe the admin tactical, but they're not good at the strategic side. Some people are really good with the larger initiatives. So we run into some incredibly talented HR people, but when they work at a 1,000-man company with a big HR team, they can focus on tactical and strategic. When they come into a smaller organization, now they're expected to one employee answer every single employee call and question. There's a line of employees out their door. So you're spending this huge salary on someone that's supposed to be doing your strategy, and they're sitting here just putting out all the employee fires all day. So we really need to define the roles and say, if we have someone that's very good at strategy, how are we going to fill that tactical admin side? Or if someone's good there, how are we going to fill the other side? So it's really taking a look at the skill sets you have within the organization and then supplementing it with either more people or a partner or a vendor or somebody like that to be able to round out that team so you can really grow. But it starts with basics with even some pretty large companies.
Wow. I'm not shocked anymore when I hear that. I used to be so shocked, but now I really understand how many big companies are run and there's just so many broken systems.
Yep.
And it always does come back to the basics, getting really good at the basics. And it's funny because we don't like the basics.
Nope.
They're boring. The basics are boring.
We want the fun. And we talk about all the time is we'll pick an HR project that we do all the time at PuzzleHR is doing a survey of the employees. Everyone I talk to is like, I would love the survey. Well, I did survey my staff, right? They go, how'd that go? You got 200 employees, you send them 20 questions. So what, you got 4,000 answers to go through. And what happens is people survey employees, 30% of people do it.
Yep.
It lingers. No one looks at the results. And then when someone tries to dive into it and there's 600 answers, nothing ever happens. They read a few key takeaways, and they're usually the outliers and the extremes, the vocal ones. So they're sitting there going, oh, we need to change this because 3 people hate this. They might be the only 3 people that hate that. So they're taking these small data sets and making business decisions on it. When PuzzleHR was designed and we started doing these surveys, it gives us a lot of insight. But we said we need almost an entire team just to do surveys. We need to be able to launch the appropriate questions out. And for instance, we had a restaurant group that had a lot of locations and a few hundred employees. And when we launched the survey out, not everyone's on their emails. So when they're working the front counter and they're working in the kitchen, they're not looking at company emails like somebody would on a 9 to 5 sitting at a desk job. So we have to get creative, right? We have to create a QR code for the survey, get all the managers on board. So in their next staff meeting, you end 10 minutes early, everyone scans it, everyone takes it before they leave the room. And now we're getting that whole populations of responses. But now we have a team to analyze thousands of responses so we can really make educated business decisions. And employees love it. They want a voice. They don't want to do another survey that's going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Employees hate when something changes. Obviously, no one likes it. We have all change management. But the worst is when there's a change and it never even finishes. Leadership changes their mind mid-flight. They realize they're going to do something different. So we can do a survey and very quickly get back, hey, we heard you. We want to give you a voice. And an example I'll use is we had an organization where all the employees were complaining they were stuck working on their birthdays, they're short-staffed, they were working overtime. And we made the business decision that it was worth it to give every single employee their birthday off as a paid day off. And they said, we can afford this. This makes sense. The culture shift of every single employee hearing that within days of taking a survey was huge because now they know their voice was heard and leadership cares about them. And then some of the bigger underlying changes, a lot of inefficiencies, some managerial inefficiencies, their onboarding process, so atrocious, a lot of people didn't even want to work there. And this leadership group cared so much. But once we started getting the feedback, we said, your turnover is a huge cause just due to not having an effective onboarding process. So if we can streamline onboarding to be quick, easy, efficient, and the employees can ride the excitement of their new job to the first day of work and not already regret taking this job, it's a whole different dynamic for those first 90 days. So a lot of these things they're tough to do if you're just an HR team of 1 or 2. So the executives out there, it's picture investing in HR if done correctly is one of the biggest ROIs you can have. One of the ways to stabilize a lot and accelerate your growth. But you got to make sure you invest in your HR team in the right places.
Yeah. I mean, and you keep saying our HR team, it's investing in your people. Like by investing in your HR team, you're investing in your people because that is what they are for, is to support the team. There were so many things that I just love about what you said. And I think that everyone listening can probably relate to taking a survey and taking it being like, nothing's going to happen with this because we've all done it. We've all experienced it. And so that's kind of the first step is no matter what, whether it's a survey, an initiative, whatever it is, really understanding the why behind doing it.
Yep.
We need to know, why are we doing it and what are we going to use the results for so that we aren't just continuing to do things that our people are like, oh yeah, they keep saying that nothing really happens. And I love that you talked about onboarding because I was recently reading an article that talked about with attracting or retaining great talent, you can attract really great people and then lose them so quickly simply because of onboarding. And it reminded me of this book that I read years ago. That's a phenomenal book by Joey Coleman called Never Lose a Customer Again. That's the name of the book. It's a great book. And one of the things he talks about in the sales process is when we have, after you make a big sale, like a big purchase, you have buyer's remorse.
Sure.
Unless you get that feel good, right? Like it's like when you buy a home and the realtor comes and they give you some type of a gift, you get a car and you get a call from the person that sold you, something that just helps remind you, you made the right decision. You should feel good about the decision that you made. We understand that it was a really big deal. Now, you just took a new role. That's a really big move. It is life-changing. And so we then have to have that onboarding process. So someone says after a week, after a month, I made the right decision. I'm so glad that I'm here. And in order to do that, we've got to be intentional about it. So with onboarding, let's just dig into onboarding a little bit because I think it would be really interesting to see, again, going back to the assessment, what can a leader that's like, ooh, I don't even have an onboarding process, which I know a lot of companies don't.
I missed all of them.
Where do we start? How
Yeah.
can we start to build out a really effective onboarding process?
Yeah. So onboarding process, you need to define it first, right? So typically I'll define onboarding and then orientation as two separate areas. So onboarding, picture the physical act of getting everything knocked out that needs to be knocked out prior to day one of work. So this will be things, background checks, drug screens. This will be filling out your W-4. This will be getting into your benefits, getting into the payroll system, your direct deposit, right? So all of those things are a huge burden to that new employee that just said yes. They're on the high, like you said, they're so excited. And again, they sat there stressing over leaving their last job. They had countless conversations with family or whoever. Am I going to switch jobs? Is this a risk? And we realize how big of a job it is. A lot of times the person doing the onboarding or the leadership forget how big of a decision it is for them. They go, yeah, I got someone new starting tomorrow. That someone new starting tomorrow is changing their life.
Yes.
And with that, the second that person agrees, picture if then you immediately get a warm welcome, whether it's, the phone call and the email. Let me walk you through, we got to do the paperwork for you. Let's get to the W-4. And then all of a sudden they go, well, heads up, the taxes have changed probably since you filled this out 3 years ago on your last new job because I have your resume and know what you did. So let me acknowledge the fact that things have changed, but we handhold you through. Here's the resources to help you through this. Versus, hey, yeah, you'll get an email from HR tomorrow. And then also a link shows up, probably goes to spam. They don't see it. They're waiting for a day or two. They go, nothing came in. They call the company back. The company didn't even call them to say, why didn't you start this? And they're like, where's the link? Oh, we sent it to you. Like, they're off to the bad start already. So then they start going through the process, and a lot of people go, I don't understand how to fill this out. What is this I-9 thing? Like, you need my passport? What? Like, if you don't handhold someone through the steps and explain the why behind it and make it really well executed, it drags on forever. It slows their start date. They get there the first day and we say, wait, before we're going to train you, we still have to fill out more forms. So we want to knock out the hard, complicated part very quickly, efficiently with some handholding. So that way, when they get there for the first day or virtually on their first day in a lot of places, then that's where the orientation and culture kicks in. And we're starting off on the right foot. And then from there, it's what does orientation look like? If they're virtual, why is it $20 spent so DoorDash or Uber Eats delivers a meal that they can sit there with their new boss and really enjoy day one? Because they're not getting that culture bomb of everything when they go into a location, a brick and mortar spot. So there's a lot of variance and people are still getting used to virtual in some companies, how to do things successfully. But to start, we've got to even do the onboarding well, because that triggers a lot of time.
It's the start of that feel good of the culture. Like,
Yep.
What is the culture of this organization? And if already it feels very disjointed and there's just no process, it does not make someone feel like they made the right decision.
The amount of times we've done that and talked to somebody and they go, I don't think this person knows what they're doing. Talking about the HR person or talking about the owner, they're like, this place doesn't have their stuff together. Am I going to get paid next week?
Oh,
gosh. Just they didn't fill out their payroll stuff correctly. And then you go, okay, well, I'm on a bi-weekly pay cycle. We get paid next Friday. Do I get paid next Friday? They're like, let me check if you get some hours next week. I don't know when our pay days are. And like, there are so many things that happen. And a lot of times the leadership, the executive group, they haven't been onboarded by the company. A lot of them maybe started the company, or when they got onboarded, someone held their hand through it. But that's not the experience the employee's getting. And a lot of times they're unaware of it. So yeah, there's a lot of things come down to process and efficiency.
Yeah. And the person on your team that's responsible for onboarding has to recognize that they're responsible for the feeling of that person. Like, that person needs to have that feel, like, do whatever we can to make sure that person feels good. They feel like they have what they need to succeed. They have everything in place. There's no questions going back and forth. And they feel good about it. They feel good about a company that they're about to invest a lot of time and energy and they're resources too.
And there's
Oh
so
my
many
gosh.
times where someone is sold, like we talked about buying something, right? A lot of times they're sold on this company and they care about the people and they see the flyers everywhere and they make the leap of faith to join it. And before they even get there, they don't feel that way. And then when they get there and all of a sudden they call up, hey, I got to change my bank account quick. I didn't realize I gave you my old bank account. And they're like, oh, let me figure out who can help you with that. They're already uncertain that they're not getting the warm and fuzzies that they were sold. A lot of times it's process, it's efficiencies, it's repeatable actions. And because businesses can't afford and have the luxury of redundancy in every position, if the person that does the onboarding is off for a week, their kids are homesick, and now that onboarding delays 3, 4, 5 days and there isn't somebody else to handle it successfully, you're going to have a group of people that have a rough experience. So we need to be able to have repeatable actions and some sort of redundancy in place on all areas of HR, not just onboarding.
Yeah. So, all right, we went a little deep into some of the different puzzle pieces of
Sure.
HR. And I know that you could go in depth in all of them, but what you do at Puzzle HR is really cool. And the name speaks
Sure.
perfectly around what you do. It's like you're really fitting all of those pieces of the puzzle together so that an organization has everything that they need in their HR department to help make sure that everybody is getting onboarded correctly. The culture is good. The processes, systems that every organization needs. We need processes
Yep.
and systems. It's not the fun stuff, but it's the necessary stuff. So tell us a little bit about Puzzle HR, what you guys do, and how you really work with companies to help them be so successful.
Puzzle was born out of the idea of everything we've talked about. Not one HR person or HR team can have every skill and every knowledge. And also, they're not going to be there every single day. Someone's going to be sick. Someone's going to call out, right? So what we did is we designed a team of experts. We have hundreds of very talented HR people throughout the whole country, and they're able to fill in the gap, the missing puzzle piece of what a business needs. So if you have an HR team that says, we'll use today's example, we want to onboard our employees, but we don't have the bandwidth to onboard 5 people every week. So our HR team would help them design the process. We have an onboarding team that can just onboard all their employees for them. So now every single time an employee is hired, we onboard them the same way. We're there. We're not calling in sick. We have the redundancies and oversight in place. So maybe Puzzle is giving some HR advice and guidance, helping them with structure and documents and doing the survey and doing some HR work to round out the team. And maybe they don't have the humans inside to onboard, or they need someone to run their payroll. Their payroll person quit. They got a great payroll system technology, but they need a payroll manager. So what we do is we could be a payroll manager. We can do leave of absence. We can onboard the employees. We can do the HR. So they can pick the pieces that they need, and we just supplement and partner with their team.
So, what's a good first step for a leader that's listening right now and they're thinking, we need all of those things?
Yeah.
We've got a lot of challenges and we need all of that stuff. What's a good place to start
Yep.
and then tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in baby stepping through this because we have to do it systematically, right? So typically what I'll do is I'll have a leader reach out to me. They'll call me, they'll email me, right? We can get them contact information. And usually the first thing we do is an HR assessment. I'm on with them, and typically they're going to bring on an HR manager, somebody else with them, unless maybe that person quit and they're really high and dry. But we'll do an HR assessment. So we'll talk through processes and we'll figure out what are the first main priorities and then where do they want to get to. And then typically we'll say, okay, we may need to bring in Puzzle HR to help do a handbook, do job descriptions, do an org chart, do structure stuff, the not fun stuff. We'll do that survey for you. And then we'll work on that and say, okay, you have somebody internally, you have a gap in accounts receivable that you're trying to hire for, but the person running payroll is really good at that. So why don't we start running payroll to free up 2 days a week of their time so they can do accounts receivable? So sometimes it's moving around the pieces that they had, but realistically, it starts usually with about a 60-minute or so HR assessment that me or one of my teammates would do with that CEO or whoever it may be. And then we'd obviously prescribe some areas that we might be able to help them.
Awesome. We love a good assessment. Let's assess and then you get started. And that's what's exciting is you get to build and grow. None of this stuff happens overnight. We talk about culture all the time, and it's not something that you can just flip a button
Nope.
or hire one person. It is a process that we get better, just a little better every day, but we've got to be strategic about it. And that's what I really love about what you all do, because you really take it from that holistic perspective of all the different areas, understanding the leadership, understanding the processes, systems from the onboarding to beyond, and then really helping their teams develop, which all of that stuff needs to be happening. It's a lot. It's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot. And that's why we stay in our lane of people-focused HR. We're not a technology. We're not a payroll company. We don't do benefits. We are straight HR people for their organization. And it works really well. We have a great relationship with our clients because we're part of their team.
I love it. All right. What is one piece of leadership advice that you would share to the listeners before we let you go?
We mentioned it at one point today already, but invest, but strategically. Invest in your HR department, but research it. We want to invest strategically because if you invest in HR, that ripple effect and stabilizing HR will be one of the best ROIs you can have.
I love it. Awesome. Well, Doug, thank you so much for chatting with us today. We'll have to have you come back on because there's so many other things we could talk about. Hiring mistakes, all like
I could talk about this for days.
all day long. Well, we'll have to have you come back. So thanks so much for joining us on the show. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Kay. It was a pleasure.
And there you have it. I told you there were so many things that we could go on and on and on about when it comes to HR. But I do hope that you found some value in this episode and that you are going to make your own assessment of where you are now in the HR process and where you really want to go over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and what that would look like. Because as we talked about in this episode, it starts with HR, right? They help us hire great people, onboard those people to make sure that we retain those great people and then develop those people. So this is what's so important. In fact, whenever we talk about the culture solution and the 6 principles of a dynamic culture, principle number 4 is hire with rigorous discipline. And then all of the other principles, that stuff works when we have the right people. So it starts with having the right people and then of course, developing the right people. So I hope that you found some value and that you're leaving with at least one takeaway, something that you can bring to your HR department or team or someone in your organization, and just open up a dialogue, have a conversation about what needs might be missing in your HR processes and systems, and then figure out what is that next step, what does that look like, and then go from there. Because it's all about progress. Progress, not perfection, right? We just get to make one small step towards becoming a better organization or a better leader. Just one small step. Better today than we were yesterday. And if you are looking for some support in your leadership and in developing your people, we would love to talk to you about coaching and what that might look like to hire a coach, to invest in a coach so that you're able to work on yourself, work on your business, and help you and your people grow. So you can go over to floydcoaching.com and someone on our team will get in touch with you and have that conversation. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you. And until next time, lead with culture.